Hello and welcome to ClearCast. This is episode 23. This is the Real Estate FinTech podcast. I am Jeff Allen, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and colleague, Kenon Chen. Kenon, how are you?
I'm good. Happy New Year, Jeff.
Happy New Year, Kenon.
First
this
episode.
Is the first.
I said
first pod of 2022. I said first.
I said
You said first. First pod of the year, and we are going to get this kicked off with a bang. We do have the lovely Elizabeth Braman from Joyhub joining us a little bit later on. But let's start off with some news, industry news. And this is a piece of industry news that hits very close to the home of Kenon Chen and Jeff Allen, the valuation or appraisal space.
Exciting. Everyone loves
exciting
that.
To you. Yeah, exciting to you and me, not exciting to most other people. But this is exciting because it's going to lead to a better customer experience and a better process. The big news is that the FHFA and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have officially announced, effective January 19th, that they will soon be offering a desktop appraisal option. Did you know that, Kenon? Do you pay attention to this stuff?
I mean, it sounds really new the way you say it.
The concept of desktop appraisals is not new. Been around for 6 million years, but this is the first time that it will be allowed in a major way for all lenders, for all loans being, or for many loans being sold to Fannie and Freddie. So let me give you the breakdown, Kenon, on the details.
Right.
What this will allow is for lenders to skip a full traditional appraisal and just do a desktop appraisal, where the appraiser never visits the property, which is a pretty big deal, because obviously the appraiser visiting the property creates a lot of the capacity constraints we see in the industry and the turn time problems. This will be offered on purchase loans only, so no refis, with a 90% LTV or lower, which is a pretty big chunk of the purchase book that gets sold to Fannie and Freddie.
That seems super
You're
cool.
doing a good job pretending you're not familiar with any of this.
I like what you're laying down so far.
Okay, so the key is that the appraiser needs to have sufficient information on the property to perform the desktop. And that information is going to include some basic required photos that the appraiser certainly is probably going to be able to get from the MLS. They'll have to be in the MLS, and the appraiser will need to have excuse me, a floor plan that illustrates gross living area and how that's calculated, which would be new for something to be in the MLS. So, Kenon, what do you think of this news? Is this a big deal? Is this a small deal? What's your take?
I think it's a big deal. I mean, it's a step. It's a step, right? It's not, it's not the grand vision of, the one-click mortgage or one-click real estate transaction, right? But it seems like a step in the right direction. And for the sake of our podcast listeners, the idea of real estate fintech, I think it's one of the first significant things in appraisal that really tells the story of how real estate and real estate technology and financial technology can work together, because of this digitized floor plan requirement. So when you think about it, the mortgage industry is asking or expecting realtors, real estate agents and brokers to behave a bit differently on the information that they would gather during the listing process, so that the mortgage process can be streamlined and you don't have to go and inspect the home again. So, the reliance upon data gathered earlier in the process and gathered in the right format the cool thing also is that they're not asking for something. Mortgage isn't asking for something that doesn't benefit the listing process itself. You know, we saw during COVID, right, that the rise of virtual tours, 3D imagery, floor plans, you know, the ways that someone can virtually walk through the home or understand the flow of the home before they even visit it, before they do an open house. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine that, you know, made an offer or got an offer accepted on a home here in the Bay Area and hasn't even seen it yet, hasn't even visited it yet, right? And
Wow.
how would you do that? Well, better information online, and that same information is now being used to streamline appraisals. So on the buy side, you don't have loans with closing delays because of appraisal. So seems like a
Yeah.
win-win for both sides.
I think you're right. And what's, you know, I think incredibly exciting about it is, especially as you mentioned, you know, this podcast being about where real estate and mortgage come together. I don't know if I can think of another industry shift that's happened in my career lifetime that brings the real estate world and the mortgage world together more than this one. It's truly a pretty big deal. And if the MLSs of the world and the real estate brokerages of the world can start to really collect the data that the mortgage process needs, it has the opportunity to really make a big impact for consumers, no question.
Sure. I mean, one of the major contingencies that people always have to worry about in the offer process, right, is the appraisal contingency. And a lot of times it's because you just don't want it to kill the deal, you know, with closing delays and other things. So the more certainty that there is in that process because of the data being gathered up front, you know, I think the better it is for all parties.
Speaking of things that are better for all parties, I am here to announce that I will no longer be performing the real estate joke of the pod on every episode.
That's it.
I think Kenon just left his house to go do a shot of tequila.
No one knows whether I was celebrating off camera or, you know, really angry and upset. I'll just leave people to figure out which reaction that was.
I know that you were celebrating. I just was having a hard time keeping up with the expectations of writing a 14-minute long joke every month.
Expectations that you put on yourself, I might add.
Yeah.
No one asked
I
for
am
a 2-minute joke.
I am my own worst critic, my own worst enemy. So yes, we are going to be moving away from pods, jokes in every episode. They may still pop up from here to there if inspiration strikes, but instead, we're going to be doing stat of the pod.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right.
This is nothing funner than statistics, let me tell you.
We're going to have now a music intro to take that up a notch.
Yeah. Good call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So here's this episode's stat of the pod. According to a recent report from realtor.com, great website, lots of content, the number of people looking to purchase a home in suburban areas is 42% higher than it was pre-pandemic.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
I think that's pretty substantial, 42%. Well, the other
42% higher.
42% higher. And then it also talks about, right, 62% of online home views were also concentrated in the suburbs. I mean, it kind of speaks to the fact that maybe we weren't experiencing a blip just based on COVID, you know, a 1-year sort of COVID impact. But, you know, as this continues on, and as we see more and more, you know, remote work, you know, be the norm, and we're never going back to the way it was pre-pandemic, the need for more space, for people to live where they want to live, not necessarily tied to their commute. This might be a persistent trend.
Yeah, Absolutely. And more space, not just because everybody, I think, likes to stretch out, but if you're working from home 5 days a week, now you really need an extra bedroom.
Yeah.
Living in your 2-bedroom apartment or 1-bedroom apartment is a little less exciting when it's also your office all day, every day.
Yeah. Or you might need a soundproof studio with which to shut out the outside world.
Yes. For those that don't know, that's Kenon's setup. He lives and works all day in a music studio. Cool.
There's a slot in my door that they push food through just to make sure I'm okay.
So that you can only have pizza and pancakes. That's the only thing that fits.
Crap. Now I need to exercise. Yeah. Mm.
That was actually kind of your diet before the pandemic.
Exactly. Okay, well, we are excited for this portion of the podcast to welcome our guest. Elizabeth Braman is joining us from Joyhub. And Elizabeth spent the past 16 years as a commercial real estate and prop tech exec and entrepreneur. And recently she founded Joyhub, which is a data aggregation and business intelligence platform for apartment and rental property owners and managers. So we're going to learn more about what Joyhub's up to in that space. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, more about what Joyhub is, how it works. Certainly the property owner space and property management. Seems like there's a lot of tech being poured into that right now. Love to see what you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. And yes, that is part of how we got here. Was the past decade plus has had an exponential growth of prop tech investment from VC, driven in large part, I think, from kind of the shifts from more individual and mom and pop owner operators to a lot more institutional ownership of multifamily, and even more so now rental properties, SFR portfolios. So you've got tons of money going into technologies that have really expanded and grown the ecosystem, but in doing so, created a lot more data sets. So the primary enterprise systems that most owners and operators use have structurally focused on each individual property and managing those properties and generating data. And then you layer in all these new technologies and you've got more data. And what you end up with is a lot of siloed data. And so we set out to see whether a scalable data strategy was possible. And fortunately, turns out it is. So we connect, collect, and standardize data from various systems so that owners and managers can get to see their portfolios holistically and help surface actionable insights that they can use to maximize their performance.
Awesome. So as CEO and co-founder, this is obviously something you're very passionate about. So walk us a little bit through your origin story for Joyhub. What was kind of the flashbulb moment that led you to want to start Joyhub?
Yeah, thanks. I have been in commercial real estate for many years now, and my co-founder and I were previously at a fintech real estate startup, and we had lots of data that we would look at and underwrite and review from different sources. And in looking at all that data, you would see that it was coming in different formats and from different systems. We built some technology that we ended up spinning off and selling. And through that process, we got to meet with these large institutional owners and operators of portfolios, and they all asked the same thing. We have tons of data, but we haven't really figured out how to use it or how to capture it. Can we just plug it into your technology? And you'd say, well, I don't think it's that easy. I tell people today, it's like common, trying to open a PDF, a PowerPoint, and an Excel document, and being surprised that the formatting isn't very good, or that doesn't really make a ton of sense. And it's because data similarly has different structures, and so you can't just anyone who's worked in Excel knows you can't just jam it together. You have to kind of finesse it a little bit and smooth it out. Otherwise, it doesn't really read. It doesn't combine very well. And so if you want to put data together and be able to look at it or use it, it has to be in the same format. And part of our journey was talking to lots of operators and finding out if they had data, what would they do with it? What do they need it for? And my big aha moment, to your point, was talking to an owner who said to me, yeah, we don't really have a lot of visibility into ROI. We don't have for marketing spend, attribution issues are huge in the industry. But one of the things he said that just kind of knocked me over was, if they're not on the lease, meaning the tenant, they don't exist. And it just floored me. So grandma and grandpa and the kids who live in these communities are not considered a consumer for purposes of an owner of an apartment building if they don't know sometimes even who they are. And so how, as a real estate owner or an operator or manager, do you look at your consumer, who is the people who live in your communities, if you don't know who they are? And so that was kind of my aha moment, that like, this is an industry where you've got a third of the country rents their housing. It's their number one household expense, almost 2 times more than their second household expense. And yet we have so little visibility into who these consumers are, what their preferences are, and what makes them tick. And it's because either the data is not being captured, or it's not in a format or in a system that you can easily access it and view it. And with COVID, that just blew up a lot of our traditional ways of knowing who our residents are and knowing how to serve our communities, because everything kind of turned on a dime. And a lot of the traditional face-to-face, really boots on the ground methods of building community kind of went out the window. And now you have to reconfigure your processes, your methodologies, especially now not having enough staff. We hear from a lot of our owners and operators that there's just no one to hire. There's not enough people to really serve their communities effectively. So using data to help to maximize, to streamline, to automate, and to centralize is just critical, even more so now. And ULI just put out a report saying, yeah, a lot of operators are seeing what a critical need it is to have access to these data analytics and to be able to see with greater visibility who their communities are and what their needs are.
Yeah, that's, going right to the, thanks for bringing up kind of COVID and that impact. I mean, of course, rental assistance, rental management is, a huge topic in the public eye, right, over the past year. But, if you're successful with bringing all this data together, and then also enabling property managers and operators to work better across multiple properties in their portfolio, what does that do, I guess, for the way that the industry even approaches this? I mean, it seems like you mentioned SFR, single family rentals, there's a lot of institutional money kind of going into that space with the systems already to think about a portfolio and to think about what they buy next and all of that. Does that give some of these, if you're successful, does that give some of these individual, owners the opportunity to behave a little bit more like one of these institutional investors?
Absolutely. I think that in a market like this one, where acquisitions are so difficult, you've got low cost debt, you've got high priced properties, you've got scarcity of availability of product in the market. When you look at people on the acquisition side, look at data constantly to try and make sure that they are looking at things with precision when making buying decisions, because nickels and dimes really do make a big difference when you're underwriting deals going in. On the operations side, there's not been as much visibility. And so to get the alpha that you need to be able to create and generate NOI means looking at thousands of different data points. I mean, that's the thing with portfolios, is there's just so much to look at. There's so many, where do you push NOI? How do you do it? Is it that you increase revenue opportunities, reduce expenses, and if expenses, which expenses? And you can only do that with context. You can only do that when you know which things you're overpaying or have opportunities to improve upon. And you don't have that context without a lot of properties to look at. So if you're a smaller operator, or even if you're a big operator, a lot of big operators don't have the ability to really view their portfolios holistically because they're using so many different data sets. So having that visibility to be able to do comparative analysis, to look at trends, to do predictive analytics, absolutely critical, particularly in times like today when you have these really high priced property values in the market, and you're just trying to find those incremental improvements, which just have such a massive impact. I think I was looking, $20,000 increase to NOI is at a 4 cap. You're talking $500,000 to valuation of the property. I mean, like, that's not insignificant for something that could be a really small line item on a budget, but a really impactful thing when you look at across a portfolio, the value that can be created.
Yeah, so as Keaton mentioned earlier in the call, the rental space, the SFR space is hot. Mm-hmm. I felt weird just saying that, but I said it. But so there's a lot of money pouring in, there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of innovation. So what do you feel like is Joyhub's kind of primary competitive advantage in that space? What do you guys do that's truly unique?
On the rental side, I think there is a opportunity to use additional data sets and really layer in your own investment thesis, and to look at how algorithmically or programmatically, however you want to look at your investment thesis when applying the data. And that's really kind of the differential that you can provide when looking at your investors. Is it an ESG that you want to drill down into, some initiative that you're able to show? Is it a particular community or community type that you're looking at that you want to target, and using the data to help to create more cohesion to a portfolio, to create a better story? Because with SFR, it's a little more disparate, and the properties aren't all in one unit. Your marketing is going to be different from property to property and market to market. So it's harder to find those threads, that continuity of story that you can more easily get with apartment communities. So I think just having the ability and the access to those data points to really build and formulate those stories is critical for big institutional operators who are trying to differentiate themselves in the market.
Yeah, and I want to dig a little deeper into what you talked about, which is if the property owners and operators understood who was actually in the community, who the occupants are, the consumers are, that might cause them to make different decisions. So when you're thinking about the benefits that you're providing your customer, are you thinking as well about how that might affect the communities at large, and how that might improve things for them?
Absolutely. It all plays a part, whether it's the development is a part of a property and a portfolio's life cycle. So when you're looking at how you want to craft that story, that plan, it is looking at things like which amenities are the ones that the community really wants and needs, and how do you identify which amenities that you want to build or that you want to offer to your communities, and how do you know which of those amenities are really going to provide the best ROI in the short term and the long term. I think that by nature, apartments have been fairly transactional in nature. People look at it as a 12-month lease and it turns and someone moves out. People are staying longer now. They've seen through COVID that people don't want to move as much. So how do you create customer journeys where you look and say to a resident, who is my ideal resident? How long can I get them to stay? Because you may not want them to move out at the end of the term. It may be that it is better to have them move out. It may be better to have them stay. Knowing the economics around whether it's better to have a resident stay versus leave, and what you can do to incentivize them to stay longer. Or even, and I think it's interesting, some of the larger operators are now starting to actually think about brand apartment operations and branding them and having portfolios where they can really look to maintain a resident, even if they're moving to another market, by building that brand, which hospitality is an amazing job, loyalty programs and points. And look at Hilton, look at Hyatt, they've done an incredible job of keeping people within the network. And apartments have not been historically as good about creating those brands and really looking at who is my lifetime community member and how do I cultivate them, not just for 12 months, but for a lifetime of participation in my brand and my communities, because people aren't necessarily going from renting to owning. So there really is huge opportunities there.
So to close this out, I guess a final question. We always like to gaze out into the future. What excites you most about Joyhub's journey and where you're going next? What are you guys up to?
Oh goodness. Well, I get a little geeked out when it comes to data, and I think I get so excited because it can be tremendously powerful if it is clean and accessible and consumable, and you can use it. You kind of have to wonder sometimes. Some data sets are just like a mess and they're full of errors, and then other data you can use for these predictive models that basically tell you the future. And for me, what we're doing is helping real estate companies to make their data actually usable so that they can start to build out their predictive models, and they can start to look down the road and say, okay, these are the tweaks I need to be making today to set myself up for the long term, to really position myself well in this market, whether it's a buy versus sell decision or it's just an operational decision. Do you put the gym in or not? Those are the types of things that really do inform future performance and future value. So to me, as we're starting our own internal models for our user community, and as our user base, we're over 60,000 units on the platform now, which is exciting. We're getting large enough that our models will have statistical significance as we start to run them through. And so, yeah, I get pretty excited about that. I think that is a tremendously powerful thing that we can offer to the market.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, really appreciate it. It's really interesting kind of hearing, from your perspective and kind of what's going on in the space. So glad that we met at Blueprint last year, and looking forward to running into you again this year. So yeah, thanks, Elizabeth.
I should be there. I think we're in Vegas this year, so that'll be fun. Yes. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You can't trust Kenon in Vegas. He gets a little crazy, so
No?
be careful.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Ludicrous in the desert.
All right.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Cool. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Well,
Thanks,
thank
Elizabeth.
you guys. Really appreciate your time. Take care.